They left me in New York with nothing. No money, no phone, no explanation. I was 14. I thought they were grabbing coffee. Turns out they were leaving me behind. For good. My name's Mia. And 10 years later, I walked into a legal meeting wearing a thrifted suit and glasses they didn't even recognize, until I took them off. That moment? It wasn't revenge. It was something deeper. Have you ever had to rebuild your life from nothing just to face the people who broke it? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if the people who abandoned you were suddenly sitting across the table, needing you? The jazz playing from the ceiling speakers was just loud enough to mask the scraping of forks on ceramic plates, but not quite enough to muffle the silence between us. My father's coffee had gone cold, untouched. My mother's lipstick left a red half-moon on the rim of her mug. I was halfway through my scrambled eggs, trying not to eat too quickly, pretending we were a regular family on a regular morning. It was April, just chilly enough that my jacket didn't feel like enough. Through the foggy diner windows, I watched yellow cabs speed past puddles that reflected streetlights, still flickering from the night before. We were in the middle of Manhattan, but it might as well have been the moon for how far I felt from home. Dad kept checking his watch. He wasn't even subtle about it. Every few minutes, he tapped the face like maybe the time would shift if he stared hard enough. Mom scrolled through her phone with her thumb so tense, it looked like she was trying to erase the screen. Still, they smiled, asked if I wanted more juice, told me I should take a photo of the maple syrup bottle because it had that vintage look. I nodded, even snapped the photo, tried to play along, tried to be the kind of daughter worth including. They'd taken me on this trip last minute, said it would be good for us, just the three of us. A reset, Mom had called it. No little brother, no late-night work calls, no more yelling. I'd messed up a few times recently, missed school, failed a quiz, got into a shouting match with another girl. But I thought, maybe this meant they wanted to try again. I should have noticed the small things. The way our hotel only had one room key, and Dad always kept it. The fact that Mom didn't unpack anything except her makeup bag, that they never mentioned dinner plans. I noticed, of course. I always noticed. But I didn't ask. I didn't want to ruin it. I saw a souvenir shop across the street, Mom said, folding her napkin slowly. Why don't you go take a look? 15 minutes max. I blinked. Now? She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Might be your only chance before it gets crowded. Dad slid a few bills under the edge of the plate. We'll meet you out front. So I went. I even jogged across the crosswalk when the light turned red. Inside the store, I wandered the aisles, fingers brushing against snow globes and miniature yellow taxis. I settled on a cheap silver keychain shaped like the Empire State Building. It wasn't much, but I thought they'd appreciate the gesture. When I got back to the diner, the booth was empty. No cups, no plates, just the faint imprint where they had been sitting. I looked outside, thinking maybe they were waiting at the corner. Maybe they'd stepped out for a smoke or a quick call. I waited. 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. I tried calling. My mom's phone rang once, then went to voicemail. Dad's didn't even ring. I texted, "Where are you? I'm out front. This isn't funny." No answer. I walked back to the hotel. The clerk at the front desk gave me a puzzled look when I asked for a spare key. Then he clicked through his screen and said, "I'm sorry, miss, but that room checked out this morning." I remember standing there, still clutching the plastic bag from the souvenir shop, the keychain rattling softly inside. I must have looked confused because the man asked if I was okay. I lied. I said I was meeting someone and stepped outside. Rain had started to fall, light and cold, the kind that seeps into your clothes and stays. I walked aimlessly until I found a bench tucked beside a newsstand. I sat down, phone still in hand, and stared at the last text I'd sent. My stomach started to twist. Not from hunger, though I hadn't finished my eggs, but from something heavier. Something sinking. I scrolled through every message thread I had with them. Most were short. Mom reminding me to clean my room. Dad forwarding me my brother's science fair win like it was news. There wasn't a single text that said, "I love you." The streetlights buzzed overhead. A man walked past and glanced at me, then kept going. I wanted to ask someone, anyone, what I was supposed to do now, but I couldn't open my mouth. I opened my backpack. It was still there. My sketchbook, a pack of gum, the worn paperback I brought for the flight. No charger, no cash. I realized my wallet was gone too. I must have left it on the table. Or maybe they took it. My phone buzzed once in my hand. I looked down, heart-catching. Low battery, not a call, not a text. Just the screen reminding me what was coming. I curled up on that bench, hugging my arms around myself. The keychain pressed into my palm, cold and sharp. For a long while, I didn't move. I listened to the sounds of New York, honking, laughter, distant trains, and wondered if anyone else had been left behind like this. Years later, I would learn the answer. But right then, I was just a girl with no place to go, holding a tiny silver building that would never be home. The nights in New York didn't feel like nighttime when you had nowhere to go. They stretched, slow and endless, like a sentence you couldn't finish. I spent one of them curled near the base of a subway stairwell, knees pulled tight to my chest, pretending the concrete beneath me was just another bench. The chill sank into my bones, and the ache in my stomach blurred into the ache behind my eyes. I hadn't slept. Not really. Just closed my eyes and counted cars as they rattled by above. At some point, a man in a windbreaker dropped a half-eaten pretzel beside me. I didn't touch it. Not then. I wasn't ready to admit I needed it. When morning came, I wandered farther out, past the places with too many windows and too many people who looked straight through you. Brooklyn felt a little quieter, a little slower. Like maybe if I walked long enough, someone might notice I didn't belong. I kept to the alleys behind bodegas and laundromats. I wasn't looking for anything. Not food, not help. Just a place where no one would ask questions. The hunger had dulled by then. Less of a growl, more of a slow pulsing under my ribs. I wasn't counting hours. I'd lost track of them already. That's when I saw it. A stack of bread crates outside a corner bakery, metal shutters still down. The top crate held what looked like day-old bagels, imperfect and sunken in the middle. They were wrapped in thin paper, probably meant for the trash. My hand hovered for a second before I reached out. Fast. Just one. I thought I was quiet, but someone grabbed my wrist. Not hard, not mean, just firm. "You want bread," a voice said. "You wash trays." I froze. A woman stood in the doorway, hair pulled back in a loose gray bun, flour on her sleeves, and a look that said she didn't care how scared I was. Not in the way most adults do. She wasn't afraid I'd steal. She wasn't angry either. She just looked certain. "I'm sorry," I muttered, voice barely audible. She didn't flinch. "Then come in." I followed her, unsure why. Maybe because she didn't raise her voice. Maybe because she hadn't asked who I was. Or maybe because the smell, warm yeast and butter, wrapped around me like a memory I didn't know I missed. Inside, the bakery was narrow, dimly lit, and cluttered with mixing bowls and flour-dusted trays. A cat, scruffy and slow-moving, lounged by the oven. The woman tossed me a towel and nodded toward a stack of metal trays. "Scrub them. I want to see my reflection in each one." I didn't ask her name. I didn't ask what I'd get in return. I just went to the sink and started scrubbing. The water was cold, and the vinegar smell stung my nose. My fingers slipped more than once, and each time the tray clattered, I winced, expecting her to yell. She never did. She kneaded dough in silence, only glancing over once to correct my grip on the sponge. Hours passed, or maybe it was less. My arms shook from exhaustion. My hands had gone red. I didn't complain. When the last tray was rinsed and stacked, she looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time. "Good enough," she said. I didn't know what that meant. I just stood there, arms limp at my sides. She gestured with her chin. "Upstairs, last door on the left." I hesitated. "You work," she added. "You stay." "That's the rule." I followed her direction, up the narrow staircase that creaked with each step. The attic was small with slanted ceilings and a dusty window. A cot sat in the corner, made up with a single thin blanket. On the nightstand was a chipped mug holding a stub of a vanilla candle, half burned. There were no pictures on the wall, no welcome sign. But there was silence, and I didn't feel watched. I sat on the edge of the cot and took off my shoes. My socks were damp. My fingertips still smelled faintly of soap and vinegar. But the ache in my stomach had turned warm. In the corner, on a tray, someone had left a bowl of soup and a piece of bread, thick, crusty, with steam still rising. I didn't ask if it was for me. I didn't need to. I ate slowly, savoring each bite like it might vanish. The soup wasn't fancy, some kind of lentil, probably, but it tasted like safety. After, I lay down. I didn't cry right away. Not until the light outside faded and I realized no one would come knocking. Not the police. Not my parents. For the first time since they left, I let myself cry. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't have to pretend not to be anymore. I fell asleep to the faint smell of vanilla and yeast. The cot creaked each time I shifted, and the wind rattled the window frame, but the sound felt far away. When I opened my eyes the next morning, the light filtering in was soft and golden. Downstairs, I heard the clatter of pans and the hiss of something frying. I swung my legs off the cot and tiptoed down. The woman stood at the counter, shaping loaves with practiced hands. She didn't look up. Without a word, she tossed something across the room. I caught it, a pale blue apron still stiff from starch. "You work," she said again, not unkindly. "You stay." That was it. No smile, no questions. Just an apron and a rule. It was the closest thing to belonging I'd felt in a long time. Some mornings began before the sun showed itself, not because I had to, but because my body stirred with the scent of rising dough and the hum of the bakery coming alive downstairs. I started to know the rhythms. The old pipes groaned at 5:12. The cat, Espresso, jumped off the windowsill at 5:19, right before Mrs. Bennet clicked on the first oven. At 5:22, the jazz station buzzed to life on the AM radio. It crackled out of tune until she gave it one sharp tap. That was my cue to come down. I didn't announce myself, just tied my apron, tighter than the day before, and started working. I rolled dough, wiped counters, swept crumbs into the same silver pan, always clockwise. The routine didn't ask questions. It just gave me something to belong to. Mrs. Bennet never hovered. She corrected with nods or short glances, her chin dipping when my fingers pressed too deep into the dough, her eyebrow lifting when I rushed the shaping. She never said, "Good job," never said, "You're improving." But I knew when I was. The regulars came early. Same faces, same orders. An elderly woman with exact change and a scarf always too thick for the weather. A teenage couple who ordered one muffin, split it in half, and argued softly about song lyrics. They didn't notice me at first. Then one morning, the old woman handed me a tiny paper envelope with 3 quarters inside. "For the extra kindness," she whispered, like she was giving away a secret. I thanked her. Quietly. Still not used to being thanked. In the afternoons, after the morning rush and tray scrubbing, I went to the library 2 blocks down. The Wi-Fi was spotty and the keyboard stuck. But they didn't ask for ID, and the air conditioning worked. I borrowed GED prep books, some from the shelves, some from a metal bin marked donation pile. I wrote math formulas on the backs of old order forms, copied essays from sample prompts onto cafe napkins I smuggled in from the bakery. Sometimes I studied at the counter after hours. Mrs. Bennet never asked what I was reading. She just refilled my cup with warm lemon tea and kept slicing apples. The first lemon scone I baked on my own burned along the edges. Too dense in the middle. I thought it was ruined. But the next day, a man with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes took a bite and said, "That's the best one you've made yet." I didn't know he'd been watching. I didn't know anyone noticed who baked what. But I smiled. For the first time in weeks, it felt real. I started recognizing the signs, the slight shimmer on the dough's surface when it was ready, the smell of yeast turning sweet when it was time to shape. I didn't need timers anymore. I listened for the shift in the oven's hum, like Mrs. Bennet had taught me by never saying it. She began leaving me alone with the mixer. That was how I knew I'd earned a new kind of trust. Sometimes, after closing, I wrapped up 2 slices of bread in napkins and left them near the park bench, where a man with a patchy beard sat with his dog. He never looked at me. I never waited for thanks, but the food was always gone by the next day. Names meant less to me then. I stopped saying Amelia Carter in my head. When people asked, rarely I just said Mia. It was smaller, easier to carry. Didn't remind me of old report cards or missing persons flyers that no one had ever made. That fall, I took my first mock GED online using the library's shaky internet connection. I didn't expect much, just wanted to see if the effort meant anything. I passed. Barely. But enough. I sat in the same plastic chair for 10 minutes after the screen flashed, "Congratulations," unsure what to feel. The librarian passed behind me, humming a tune, unaware that her sticky keyboard had just hosted a quiet miracle. When I stepped outside, the light had shifted. The breeze felt lighter, like the city had made a little more room for me. On the walk back to the bakery, I took the long alley behind the building, the one where we dumped old boxes and day-old trays. That's when I saw it. A backpack, torn along one strap, slumped beside the bins. Normally, I wouldn't have stopped, but something tugged at me. I bent down, unzipped the main pocket. Inside, a cracked laptop, scratched screen, one key missing, no charger. I almost walked away. Then I thought, maybe it still worked. I carried it upstairs like it was made of glass, cleaned it with a cloth, found an old charger base that almost fit and taped it down with the bakery's masking tape. It didn't turn on that night, or the next. But 3 days later, I pressed the power button, and the screen blinked faintly to life. The welcome screen was slow, but it was there. And something sparked inside me, brighter than I'd felt in months. Maybe it wasn't just about surviving anymore. Maybe it was time to begin again. There was no grand announcement the day I moved out. No packed car, no send-off. Just a duffel bag slung over my shoulder, and a key Mrs. Bennet handed me with no ceremony. She didn't ask where I was going. She just said, "Sunday, noon, you show up. We still do muffins." And that was that. The new place was a shared studio in Queens, barely enough space for 2 beds and a chipped desk. I split the rent with a girl named Lanny, who worked double shifts at a laundromat and rarely spoke more than 3 words after 8 p.m. That suited me fine. Silence had become my language. I kept baking on weekends, still helped open the shop, still scrubbed pans until my elbows ached. But the rest of the week, I worked from the corner of coffee shops, old libraries, or on my tiny folding desk with a blinking lamp and a fan that never stopped rattling. That laptop, the same one I pulled from the dumpster, was now held together with tape and stubbornness. Its screen flickered if I moved too fast, and the R key only worked if I punched it. But it got the job done. It started with a blog. Quiet posts about budgeting, saving on prepaid plans, opening online accounts without credit history. I didn't sign them, just posted anonymously. Then someone emailed, then another. People like me, students without support, cash workers with no bank access, undocumented nannies paid under the table, asking how to stretch $42 across 2 weeks or how to build credit when they didn't have a name the system liked. So I helped. Not as Amelia Carter. That name still felt too heavy, like a coat that didn't fit anymore. I signed everything Mia AC Solutions. It was the most I could give without giving everything. I filed for a business license using one of those legal discount sites. The email confirmation said I was now a registered sole proprietor. I stared at the screen for a long time, unsure if I should feel proud or terrified. Maybe both. Clients didn't pay much. Some didn't pay at all. One woman left me a bag of oranges as thanks. Another gave me a secondhand winter coat, 2 sizes too big. I took every gift like a blessing. At night, I wrote out savings plans by hand, calculated interest on borrowed receipts. I bought a tiny portable printer with saved-up tips and used it to print budget templates. I found comfort in numbers. They didn't lie or vanish overnight. Mrs. Bennet never asked what I was up to. She just noticed things, like the time she caught me scribbling charts on the backs of sugar delivery invoices, or when I gave a woman at the counter her total before the register even finished loading. I thought she might say something, but she just nodded and kept slicing bread. The first real moment it hit me, the weight of what I was building, was the day one of my clients, a college dropout named Darren, emailed me a photo. It showed his tuition statement with a balance of $0. "You saved me 6 years of debt," he wrote. I printed the email and folded it into my notebook like a secret. When the bakery's espresso machine finally died, its handle cracked and steam valve leaking, I didn't hesitate. I used the profit from a small stock I'd been watching for months, bought the machine under a vendor account, delivered anonymously. Mrs. Bennet didn't ask who sent it. She just opened the box, examined the parts, and wiped her hands on her apron. "Still ugly," she muttered, "but it'll work." I smiled to myself and walked out. Every time I visited a new borough, whether for work, errands, or by accident, I bought a keychain. Some cheap, some handmade. I hung them in a row beside my bed. It wasn't much, but it felt like a trail, proof I had been somewhere, that I had chosen to stay. I didn't post photos of my work online. I didn't put my name on flyers. I didn't want the world to see me. I just wanted the people who needed help to find it. Then, one Sunday afternoon, after closing, I found Mrs. Bennet sitting in the back room, thumbing through the mail. She slid a single page across the counter toward me. No words, no eye contact. A flyer, black ink on cheap paper. Foreclosure auction, Buffalo, residential property, address listed. My eyes scanned the numbers. I didn't need to ask. I recognized it instantly. It was their house. The one they bought after they left me behind, the walls I'd only seen in background photos and real estate listings, the lawn they posted about with fake captions like, "Grateful for our fresh start." It sat on that flyer like any other house, one of many, but to me it was a headline I hadn't dared imagine. I looked up at Mrs. Bennet. She didn't speak, just raised one eyebrow like always, a look that said, "Well?" And in that moment, I knew. I didn't want to go back. But maybe it was time to stop running. I used to think closure meant a moment, a clean one. A conversation, maybe. Some trembling apology, a long sigh. The kind of thing people say when they've had time to regret. But standing in the freezing wind of a parking lot in Buffalo, New York, I learned something else. Closure doesn't come with an apology. Sometimes it shows up in silence, holding a bitter card with your pseudonym on it. We arrived early. Mrs. Bennet wore her usual gray coat and a knitted hat I'd never seen before. She didn't complain about the cold. She never did. I wore a thrifted charcoal suit and a pair of gloves that didn't match. It didn't matter. No one looked at us twice. The auction was set up under a white canopy behind the county administration building. The plastic chairs wobbled slightly with the wind, and people stood in clusters, murmuring about investment potential and clean flips. No one cared about the stories inside the homes. They just wanted square footage and resale. The house I came for was number 27 on the list. Livia D., the registration sheet read, listed as the owner of AC Solutions. Perfectly legal, perfectly distant from the girl who used to sleep on a subway stairwell. When the bidding began, I didn't blink. Mrs. Bennet held our card. Her hand didn't shake. We stayed quiet while the auctioneer rattled off numbers like they were nothing more than math problems waiting to be solved. One man, mid-40s, probably a local flipper, kept glancing our way. He raised the price by increments that tried to intimidate. I didn't respond. I just nodded slightly at Mrs. Bennet, and she lifted the card again. The man frowned, folded his arms, tried one last bid. We went higher. He dropped out. The gavel slammed against the wooden podium. Sold to bidder 162. We didn't cheer, didn't smile. I just let the paper print from the small mobile machine and took it with both hands. Address confirmed. The house they bought after they left me behind now belonged to me. We walked to the street afterward. I asked Mrs. Bennett to stop a few blocks away, just far enough that I could walk the final stretch alone. She nodded, always giving me room when I needed it. The house looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe it never was big, just distant. The shutters had faded and the porch railing leaned slightly. There were still wind chimes near the door. I remembered hearing them once in the background of a video they posted, smiling, waving, pretending. I stood on the sidewalk, keys in hand, and waited for something to happen inside me. Nothing did. No wave of rage, no heartbreak, just stillness. I took a slow breath, my lungs stinging from the cold. I wasn't returning as a daughter. I wasn't even returning. I was arriving as someone who had made a life without them, someone who had built something steady enough to hold others, who understood now that survival wasn't a fluke. It was a skill. I didn't need to open the door. Not yet. I walked back to the car. Mrs. Bennett didn't ask what I saw. She just handed me a paper cup with lukewarm coffee and a protein bar she'd pulled from her bag. "That went fast," she said simply. It did. We didn't say more. Back in Queens, I set the legal appointment with a quiet real estate office. No flash, just a room with beige walls and a table too big for the chairs around it. The agent assigned to handle the transfer barely glanced at the names. Just need IDs and ownership documents. Simple process. Simple. The Carter house was no longer the Carter house. I'd made sure there would be no drama, no lockouts. They'd be given time to move, boxes, trucks, directions to housing assistance programs if needed. I wasn't here to punish, but I wasn't here to forget either. The meeting was set for Friday. I didn't sign my name, just left the signature line blank for now. "They have no idea who they're meeting," I told Mrs. Bennett as I filed the last of the paperwork. She looked at me carefully. "You ready for that?" "I'm not sure." "You don't need to be." We left it there. I spent the next 2 days making a list, not of things to say, but things I wouldn't. I didn't want to rehash the past. I didn't need their stories, their reasons, or their excuses. All I wanted was to show up, sit down, and finish something. The night before the meeting, I stood in front of the mirror, hair pulled back, glasses smudged at the edges. I thought about taking them off. Then I left them on. Let them see me clearly, let them look and still not recognize the person I'd become. That would be enough. They erased me to feel lighter. I know that now. Erased me like a smudge on their picture-perfect life, thinking the absence of weight was the same as peace. What they didn't understand was this. Some of us carry what we were given and make it into something heavier, but also kinder. The legal office was quiet, save for the ticking wall clock and the gentle shuffle of papers. I sat at the table with my name badge turned backward just in case. Across from me sat 2 people I once called family. They were older now. My mother wore large sunglasses even though we were indoors. My father's hair had thinned, his posture slightly hunched. For a moment I thought they wouldn't recognize me. Then I saw it. The pause. The flicker. My mother's lips parted, but no words came. I didn't offer them any. "You have 30 days, I said, placing the documents on the table. "It's all been processed, the title, the terms, everything's final." They didn't ask how, didn't ask why, just stared like maybe I'd vanish again if they waited long enough. I didn't. I stood, nodded once, and left. No yelling, no lectures, no explanations, just closure in its quietest form. Outside, rain had begun to fall, soft and steady, tapping on the windows of the car where Mrs. Bennett waited. She didn't ask what happened. She never did. She just handed me a thermos of warm coffee and nodded toward the road. "Let's go home," she said. Home. It was a 2-story house now painted soft cream, with shutters the color of overripe plums, and a porch strung with lights we hung one evening, with leftover bakery twine. We called it Second Light. Inside, cinnamon lingered in the air. Mrs. Bennett's apple loaves had just come out of the oven. The girls were in the living room. Autumn was hanging new curtains with a crooked rod she insisted she could fix alone. Jaden was arguing with Bennett about how much nutmeg belonged in a pie. Chloe curled up with a sketchbook in the corner. Madeline hummed along to an old song playing on the radio, her bare feet tapping softly on the rug. They weren't always like this. They had arrived with silence stitched into their sleeves, like I had once worn. But here, slowly, piece by piece, the stitching had started to unravel. None of us had fixed anything. We had simply begun again. I didn't hover. I just stood by the doorway watching them laugh, truly laugh. Not the kind you put on for company, but the kind that happens when you forget to be afraid. The porch became our place for stories. That spring, we celebrated the 1-year anniversary of Second Light with warm cider and homemade tarts. The girls made paper lanterns and wrote small notes to hang inside. Dreams, fears, names they'd once been called but no longer answered to. Someone had strung fairy lights across the porch railing. They blinked slowly in the dusk, a rhythm like steady breathing. Mrs. Bennett brought out a letter I hadn't opened yet. It was postmarked from Ohio, addressed to AC Solutions. Inside was a handwritten note. Dear Mia, you helped me open a savings account when no one else would even talk to me. You didn't ask who I was. You just reminded me I mattered. Thank you for giving me a place to begin. I read it twice, then folded it and slipped it into the drawer by the front door, the one we called the Hope Box. Later that night, when the porch had emptied and the lights glowed soft above me, I walked to the little wooden hook beside the entryway. It had one label: First Steps. I hung a keychain there, silver, shaped like the Empire State Building. Still had its $2.99 tag. I never needed my parents to see me again. I just needed to know that I could still see myself, that I had kept going, that I had chosen. And now, in a house filled with laughter and soft rugs and girls who no longer flinched when someone knocked on the door, I had. This wasn't triumph. It wasn't revenge. It was something better. It was continuity. And we were all still becoming. Sometimes, healing doesn't arrive with loud declarations. It tiptoes in through warm kitchens, shared laughter, and the quiet certainty that you are no longer alone. From the moment I hung that keychain marked $2.99, I knew I had rewritten what home could mean. Life rarely gives us perfect beginnings, but it offers endless chances to begin again, with grace, with help, and with the courage to turn pain into purpose. If we can extend even a small light to someone in the dark, that light multiplies in ways we may never fully see. If this story touched something in you, maybe a memory, maybe a hope, I invite you to share your thoughts. We all carry pieces of each other's stories, and sometimes it only takes one to help someone believe they can begin again.